She was promised to an Indian as payment for her father's debts. But when his sickly boy whispered through chattering teeth, "Please stay, or we won't last the winter," Ruby Ashton realized some promises were meant to be broken. Montana Territory, October 1879. The stagecoach lurched violently as its wheels found another rut in the frozen mud road, sending Ruby Ashton's worn carpetbag sliding across the cramped interior. She pressed her gloved hands against the small window, watching the endless expanse of snow-dusted prairie roll by under a pewter sky that promised an early winter. Each mile carried her further from everything she had ever known and closer to a fate she had never chosen. 3 weeks ago, she had been Ruby Ashton of Boston, Massachusetts, living in modest comfort as the ward of her late father's business partner, Theodore Blackstone. She had taught piano lessons to wealthy children, embroidered linens for church sales, and dreamed quietly of perhaps marrying the young banker who occasionally tipped his hat to her after Sunday service. Her life had been small but predictable, safe in its careful boundaries. Then Blackstone had summoned her to his study on that terrible Tuesday morning, his face grave as he spread yellowed documents across his mahogany desk. The papers told a story Ruby had never known. Her father, Charles Ashton, had borrowed heavily from a Cherokee trader named Adam Thunderbear to fund his failed mining venture in Colorado. When consumption claimed her father's life 5 years ago, the debt had remained unpaid, growing with interest like a cancer. $2,300, Blackstone had said, his voice heavy with regret, plus interest. "It's more than I can spare, Ruby. The railroad investments have failed, and my own creditors are circling like vultures." He had looked up at her with eyes that couldn't quite meet hers. "Your father made certain provisions in case of his death. A marriage contract signed and witnessed. You are to wed Adam Thunderbear, and the debt will be considered satisfied." Ruby had felt the world tilt on its axis. "A marriage contract? Papa never told me about any contract. He hoped it would never come to this," Blackstone had explained. "But Thunderbear has been patient long enough. He sent word that he expects his bride before the first snow, or he will take the matter to the territorial courts. They would seize everything, Ruby. Your father's good name, what little estate remains, even this house." The memory of that conversation still made Ruby's stomach clench with dread. She had been given 2 weeks to prepare for a journey to Montana Territory, to marry a man she had never met, of a race she knew only from sensationalized newspaper accounts and dime novels. Blackstone had assured her that Thunderbear was a respected trader, that he owned substantial land and livestock, that she would be well provided for. But his assurances felt hollow when weighed against the magnitude of what she was sacrificing. The stagecoach hit another bone-jarring pothole, and Ruby's fellow passenger, a drummer selling patent medicines, muttered curses under his breath. He had been eyeing her with increasing concern as they traveled deeper into what he called Indian country, though Ruby had seen precious little evidence of any inhabitants, Indian or otherwise. The landscape was a vast emptiness of rolling hills, covered in brown grass and patches of early snow, broken only by the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking a hidden creek. "Miss, you sure you want to be getting off at Sweetwater Station?" the drummer asked for the 3rd time that afternoon. "Ain't nothing out there but wind and wolves. No place for a refined lady like yourself." Ruby adjusted her worn wool coat and lifted her chin with more confidence than she felt. "I am expected," she replied simply. She had learned over the past weeks that the less she explained about her circumstances, the fewer questions people asked. The truth was too strange, too shameful to share with strangers. As afternoon faded toward evening, the driver's voice called down from the box. "Sweetwater Station coming up." Ruby's heart began to hammer against her ribs as she gathered her few belongings. Everything she owned fit into one small carpet bag and a battered trunk that would follow on the next freight wagon. Her entire life reduced to 2 pieces of luggage and a marriage contract that felt like a death warrant. The stagecoach rolled to a stop beside a weathered wooden building that could charitably be called a station. It was little more than a trading post, with a few rooms for travelers, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings that had seen better days. Smoke rose from the chimney, and warm yellow lights spilled from the windows, promising refuge from the bitter wind that had been building all afternoon. Ruby stepped down from the coach on unsteady legs, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The driver tossed her bag down without ceremony, eager to reach the next station before full dark. "You sure someone's meeting you, miss?" he asked, his weathered face creased with genuine concern. "Don't like leaving a lady alone out here." Before Ruby could answer, a figure emerged from the trading post. She had expected someone obviously Indian, with feathers and war paint, like the illustrations in her childhood books. Instead, she saw a tall man in his 30s, wearing well-fitted buckskin pants, a wool shirt, and a heavy coat that spoke of prosperity rather than poverty. His hair was black and worn longer than fashion dictated, but his face showed the mixed heritage that was becoming common in the territories. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Miss Ashton." His voice was deep and cultured, with only the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't identify. "I am Adam Thunderbear. I trust your journey was not too difficult." Ruby found herself staring, her preconceived notions crumbling. This man could have walked the streets of Boston without drawing a second glance, save for his unusual height and the watchful intelligence in his dark eyes. He was handsome in a way that made her suddenly conscious of her travel-stained appearance. "Mr. Thunderbear," she managed, attempting a curtsy that was made awkward by her numb legs and heavy skirts. "I am pleased to make your acquaintance." Something flickered across his face, disappointment perhaps, or resignation. "You are younger than I expected," he said simply. "Your father's letter described a woman of 25 years. "I am 22, Ruby replied, lifting her chin slightly. "But I assure you I'm quite capable of fulfilling whatever obligations—" "We will discuss obligations later," Adam interrupted gently. "For now you must be cold and tired. Come, let us get you inside where it is warm." The trading post was larger inside than it appeared from the road, with a main room that served as both store and common area. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from coffee and sugar to rifles and ammunition. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth crackling with a fire that made Ruby's frozen cheeks tingle as feeling returned. The smell of wood smoke, leather, and something savory cooking made her realize how hungry she had become. "Mary, we have a guest," Adam called toward a doorway at the back of the room. A woman emerged, clearly Indian, wearing a simple calico dress, with her hair braided down her back. She was perhaps 40 years old, with kind eyes and hands that spoke of hard work. "This is Mary Crow Dog," Adam explained. "She manages the household and has prepared a room for you. Mary, this is Miss Ruby Ashton." Mary studied Ruby with sharp but not unkind eyes, taking in her exhaustion and the careful mending on her traveling dress. "You are tired," she said in accented but clear English. "Come, I show you where you sleep. Tomorrow we talk about everything else." Ruby followed Mary through a narrow hallway to a small but clean room furnished with a bed, washstand and chair. A window looked out over the vast prairie, already fading into purple twilight. Mary set a basin of warm water on the washstand and laid out a thick towel. "You wash, rest," Mary said practically. "I bring food soon. Mr. Thunderbear, he wait until you're ready to talk." Alone in the room, Ruby sank onto the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She was hundreds of miles from everything familiar, promised in marriage to a man she had met 5 minutes ago, in a place that felt like the edge of the world. Through the thin walls, she could hear the murmur of voices and the ordinary sounds of people going about their evening routines. It was both comforting and strange to realize that life continued here much as it did anywhere else. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Ashton," Adam's voice came through the door. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Ruby quickly smoothed her hair and opened the door. Adam stood in the hallway, his expression serious but not threatening. "I thought perhaps we should discuss the arrangement before you settle in," he said carefully. "There are things you should know." "Of course," Ruby replied, though her stomach clenched with fresh anxiety. "I understand that according to the contract—" "The contract was your father's idea, not mine," Adam interrupted quietly. "I have no wish to force any woman into marriage against her will. If you find the situation impossible, I will arrange for your return to Boston." Ruby stared at him in surprise. "But the debt is between your father and myself. It should never have involved you." Adam's jaw tightened slightly. "Charles Ashton was a good man who made poor choices. I do not hold his daughter responsible for his mistakes." Relief flooded through Ruby so suddenly that her knees nearly buckled. "You mean I am free to go, if that is what you choose," Adam confirmed. "But I should tell you that the next stagecoach east will not run until spring. The mountain passes are already becoming treacherous, and winter comes early here. You would need to remain at least until the roads clear." The reality of her situation settled over Ruby like a cold blanket. She had no money for return passage, no prospects waiting for her in Boston, and nowhere else to go. Blackstone had made it clear that her welcome in his household had been exhausted. "I see," she said quietly. "Then perhaps we might discuss what arrangement would be mutually acceptable for the winter months." Before Adam could respond, a thin voice called from somewhere deeper in the building. "Papa." "Papa, I can't get warm." Adam's entire demeanor changed, his face tightening with concern. "Excuse me," he said quickly, and strode toward the voice. Ruby hesitated for a moment, then followed. The voice led them to another small room, where a boy lay curled under several thick blankets, despite the warmth from a nearby brazier. He appeared to be about 8 years old, with his father's dark hair, but a pale complexion that spoke of illness. His breathing was shallow and labored, and when he turned toward the door, Ruby could see fever burning in his dark eyes. "Noah," Adam said gently, kneeling beside the bed. "How are you feeling, son?" The boy, Noah Storm, Ruby realized, tried to sit up but was overcome by a coughing fit that shook his thin frame. When it passed, he looked past his father to where Ruby stood in the doorway. "Who is the lady, Papa?" he asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Adam glanced back at Ruby, then returned his attention to his son. "This is Miss Ashton, Noah. She has come to visit us for the winter." Noah's fevered gaze fixed on Ruby with startling intensity. "Are you going to help Papa take care of me?" he asked with the directness that only children possess. Ruby felt something squeeze around her heart. This sick little boy was the reason for Adam's distraction, the source of the worry she had seen in his eyes. She moved closer to the bed, drawn by an instinct she didn't fully understand. "I would like to help, if I may," she said softly. "What seems to be troubling you?" "I get so cold," Noah whispered. "Even when the fire is big and I have all the blankets. And I cough so much that Papa doesn't sleep." Ruby looked around the room, noting the careful arrangements that spoke of a parent doing everything possible for a sick child. Extra blankets, a brazier for additional heat, medicine bottles on a nearby table, books for entertainment. It was clear that Adam was devoted to his son's care. "How long has he been ill?" Ruby asked quietly. 3 weeks, Adam replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "It started as a simple cold, but it has grown worse despite everything we have tried. The doctor in Fort Benton said it might be lung fever, but he had no treatments to offer." Ruby's mind raced back to her childhood, when her own mother had battled a similar illness. She remembered the remedies that had helped, the careful nursing that had made the difference between recovery and decline. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward Noah. At Adam's nod, she sat carefully on the edge of the bed and placed her hand on the boy's forehead. His skin burned with fever, but his extremities were cold despite the warm room. "Noah," she said gently, "I am going to tell you a secret. When I was about your age, I was very sick too. So sick that my mama had to take special care of me all winter long." The boy's eyes widened with interest. "Did you get better?" "I did get better," Ruby confirmed. But it took time and patience and some special remedies that my mama learned from her grandmother. Would you like me to try some of those remedies with you? Noah nodded eagerly, then was seized by another coughing fit. When it passed, he looked up at Ruby with desperate hope. Please, he whispered. I don't want to be sick anymore. And Papa is so tired from taking care of me. Ruby glanced at Adam, who was watching this exchange with an unreadable expression. I would need certain supplies, she said carefully. Honey, lemon, perhaps some herbs, if they are available. Whatever you need, Adam said immediately. The trading post has a good supply of medicines, and Mary knows where to find wild herbs, even in winter. Over the next hour, Ruby found herself taking charge with a confidence that surprised her. She sent Mary to gather honey and dried elderberries, while she prepared a steam tent using hot water and pine needles to help Noah breathe easier. Adam watched silently as she worked, his expression shifting from skepticism to cautious hope. Where did you learn these techniques? He asked as Ruby adjusted the improvised tent over Noah's bed. My mother was often sick when I was young, Ruby explained, testing the temperature of the steam with her hand. I learned to help care for her. Later, I helped tend other families during the influenza outbreak of '73. She had not thought about those skills in years, but they returned to her hands as naturally as breathing. Noah submitted to her ministrations with surprising trust, even allowing her to rub a poultice of heated herbs on his chest. That feels good, he murmured as the warmth spread through his thin ribs. It doesn't hurt to breathe as much. As the evening wore on, Noah's breathing did seem to ease slightly. The harsh sound of his cough softened, and color began to return to his pale cheeks. Ruby found herself reluctant to leave his bedside, drawn by the vulnerable trust in his fevered eyes. Miss Ashton, Noah said drowsily as she adjusted his blankets for the third time. Will you stay with us this winter? Papa tries to take good care of me, but he doesn't know about lady things like you do. Ruby glanced at Adam, who was leaning against the doorframe watching them both. What kind of lady things? She asked gently. Like making the steam smell nice and how to rub the medicine so it doesn't hurt. Noah explained seriously. And singing. Mama used to sing to me when I was sick, but Papa doesn't know any songs. The mention of Noah's mother hung heavy in the air. Ruby wondered what had happened to her, but this was not the time for such questions. I know some songs, Ruby said softly. Would you like me to sing one now? Noah nodded eagerly, and Ruby began to sing a lullaby her own mother had sung to her during her childhood illnesses. Her voice was clear and sweet, filling the small room with gentle melody. Noah's eyes drifted closed as she sang, his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. When the song ended, Noah was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. Ruby rose carefully from the bed, not wanting to disturb him, and found Adam watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Thank you, he said quietly as they stepped into the hallway. I have not seen him rest so easily since he became ill. He is very sick, Ruby said honestly, but children are resilient. With proper care and time, he should recover. Adam stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Miss Ashton, I need to be honest with you about something. When I agreed to honor your father's contract, it was not for myself. I had hoped. He paused, running a hand through his dark hair. Noah has been asking for a mother since his own died 2 years ago. I thought perhaps a wife might provide the kind of care he needs, the gentle touch of a woman's hand. Ruby felt something shift in her chest as understanding dawned. You need a mother for Noah, not a wife for yourself. I need both, Adam admitted quietly. But if I had to choose, my son's welfare comes first. Always, they stood in the narrow hallway, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them. Ruby thought of the sick little boy sleeping peacefully in the next room, of the desperate hope in his fevered eyes, of the exhaustion she had seen in his father's face. Mr. Thunder Bear, she said finally, perhaps we might consider a different kind of arrangement. A partnership based on practical needs rather than romantic sentiment. Adam's eyes searched her face. What kind of partnership? You need someone to help care for Noah and manage your household. I need a place to stay until spring, and perhaps longer if I prove useful, Ruby said, surprised by her own boldness. We could enter into a trial marriage with the understanding that both parties are free to reconsider once Noah recovers and the roads clear. A trial marriage, Adam repeated thoughtfully. That is not a common arrangement. Nothing about this situation is common, Ruby pointed out, but it might serve both our needs while protecting us from unwanted complications. Before Adam could respond, Noah's voice called weakly from his room. Papa. Miss Ruby, I'm thirsty. They hurried back to find Noah sitting up in bed, looking more alert than he had all evening. His fever seemed to have broken slightly, and his breathing was noticeably easier. The medicine is working, he said wonderingly, touching his chest where the poultice had been applied. It doesn't hurt so much. Ruby moved to give him a cup of water, and as he drank, Noah looked up at her with eyes that held both gratitude and desperate need. Miss Ruby, he said in his thin voice, please don't go away. Papa tries his best, but I think maybe he needs help taking care of me. And I think maybe I need a mama again. The simple words hit Ruby like a physical blow. This sick little boy was asking her to stay, not as payment for a debt or fulfillment of a contract, but because he needed her. Because she had something to offer that no one else could give. What do you think, Noah? She heard herself saying. Would you like me to stay and help take care of you this winter? Noah's face lit up with the first real smile she had seen from him. Yes, he whispered. Please stay, Miss Ruby. I don't think Papa and I can make it through the winter without you. Ruby looked at Adam over Noah's head and saw her own decision reflected in his eyes. Whatever complicated emotions lay between them could be worked out later. Right now, a sick little boy needed her, and that was reason enough to stay. Then I will stay, she said firmly, taking Noah's small hand in hers. We will get you well again, and we will all take care of each other through the winter. As Noah settled back into his blankets with a contented sigh, Ruby realized that the marriage contract that had seemed like a prison just hours ago might actually be the key to a freedom she had never imagined. She was no longer just Ruby Ashton of Boston, fulfilling an unwanted obligation. She was Miss Ruby, the lady who could make the medicine work and sing away the fear. Outside the windows, the first snow of winter began to fall in earnest, sealing them all together in this remote outpost until spring should set them free. But for the first time since leaving Boston, Ruby found herself hoping that spring might be a very long time coming. The first light of dawn crept through the frost-covered windows of the trading post, painting the main room in shades of silver and gold. Ruby had been awake for over an hour, stoking the fire and preparing the morning remedies for Noah. Sleep had come fitfully during her first night at Sweetwater Station, her mind churning with the magnitude of the decision she had made. But as she mixed honey with warm water and crushed elderberries, her hands moved with steady purpose. 3 soft knocks on Noah's door announced her presence before she entered with the steaming cup. The little boy was already awake, propped against his pillows and drawing pictures in the condensation on his window with one thin finger. His breathing sounded clearer than it had the night before, though the flush of fever still colored his pale cheeks. "Good morning, Noah," Ruby said gently, settling into the chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, I think," Noah replied, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "The coughing didn't wake me up so much last night. Papa was able to sleep in his own bed instead of the chair." Ruby felt a warm flutter of satisfaction. Small improvements, but improvements nonetheless. "That's wonderful news. Now I need you to drink this medicine, and then we're going to try something new today." Noah accepted the cup without complaint, having already learned to trust Ruby's gentle authority. As he sipped the bitter mixture, his dark eyes studied her face with the intense curiosity that only sick children possess. "Miss Ruby, why did you really come here?" he asked suddenly, Papa said you came to visit, but people don't usually visit places like this, especially ladies from back east. Ruby paused in her preparation of the morning poultice, caught off guard by the boy's perceptiveness. Your father and my father were business partners, she said carefully. When my father died, there were some matters that needed to be settled. But you could have sent letters for business, Noah pressed. You didn't have to come all this way yourself. Unless, his eyes widened with sudden understanding. Are you going to marry Papa? The directness of the question made Ruby's cheeks burn. That's complicated, Noah. Grown-up arrangements often are. I hope you do marry him, Noah said matter-of-factly. He's been lonely since Mama died, even though he tries to hide it. And I think you're nice. You make the medicine taste better, and you don't look scared when I cough. Before Ruby could respond to this startling declaration, footsteps in the hallway announced Adam's approach. He appeared in the doorway, carrying a basin of fresh water, his hair still damp from washing and his shirt only half buttoned in his haste to check on his son. Good morning, he said, his eyes moving between Ruby and Noah with something that might have been relief. How is our patient today? Much better, Papa, Noah announced proudly. Miss Ruby gave me the honey medicine again, and it doesn't hurt to swallow. And look, he demonstrated a deep breath that ended in only a small cough instead of the violent fits that had plagued him for weeks. Adam's face lit up with the first genuine smile Ruby had seen from him. That's excellent progress, son. Miss Ruby clearly knows what she's doing. She does, Noah agreed enthusiastically. Papa, Miss Ruby and I were just talking about trying a new treatment today, Ruby interrupted smoothly, shooting Noah a warning look. I thought we might attempt a proper steam bath with some special herbs Mary mentioned. Adam raised an eyebrow at the exchange, but didn't pursue whatever Noah had been about to reveal. What do you need for this steam bath? Over the next hour, Ruby found herself coordinating a complex operation involving heated stones, aromatic herbs, and careful temperature regulation. Mary proved invaluable, producing bundles of dried sage, pine needles, and something she called breathing leaves from her seemingly endless stores. Adam contributed his practical knowledge of heating and ventilation, working alongside Ruby with an efficiency that surprised them both. Lift the corner there, Ruby instructed as they adjusted the blanket tent over Noah's improvised steam chamber. We need to create a proper seal without making it too stuffy. Adam's hands brushed hers as they worked to secure the fabric, and Ruby felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. His fingers were calloused from years of physical work, but his touch was gentle and precise. When their eyes met over the steaming basin, something flickered between them that had nothing to do with medical treatments. Like this? Adam asked, his voice slightly hoarse. Perfect, Ruby managed, stepping back quickly to check on Noah, who was sitting contentedly in his tent, breathing the herb-scented steam. This feels wonderful, Noah called out, his voice muffled by the blankets. It's like being inside a warm cloud that smells like Christmas. The treatment proved remarkably effective. After 20 minutes in the steam tent, Noah's breathing was noticeably easier, and the tight sound in his chest had lessened considerably. As Ruby helped him back into clean nightclothes, she noticed that his skin had lost some of its grayish pallor. Miss Ruby, Noah said as she tucked fresh blankets around him, do you think I'll be well enough to help with the Christmas preparations? Christmas preparations. Ruby glanced at Adam questioningly. It's still 6 weeks away, Adam explained, but Noah always helps me cut the tree and make decorations. It's been our tradition since, he paused, something shadowing his features. Since Mama died, Noah finished matter-of-factly. She used to make beautiful ornaments from pine cones and ribbons. Papa tries, but his fingers are too big for the delicate work. Ruby felt her heart squeeze at the image of this big, capable man struggling to recreate his dead wife's Christmas magic for his sick son. I'm sure between the three of us, we can manage some lovely decorations, she said gently. Really? Noah's face lit up with excitement that immediately dissolved into another coughing fit. though it was much milder than his previous episodes. "Papa, did you hear? Miss Ruby knows about Christmas decorations too." "I heard, son," Adam said softly, his eyes meeting Ruby's with an expression of gratitude so profound it made her chest tighten. "We'll have a wonderful Christmas this year." As the day progressed, Ruby found herself settling into the rhythm of life at Sweetwater Station with surprising ease. Mary proved to be a wealth of practical knowledge about frontier living, teaching Ruby which supplies were essential for winter survival and how to preserve foods without proper refrigeration. The trading post itself fascinated her with its eclectic mix of goods designed to meet every conceivable need of travelers and local settlers. "Mr. Thunderbear trades fair with everyone," Mary explained as she showed Ruby the inventory system. "White settlers, Indian families, Mexican traders from the south. All are welcome here if they come in peace." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "That must be unusual in these territories," Ruby observed, remembering the tensions she had read about in Eastern newspapers. Mary's expression grew serious. "Mr. Thunderbear, he understands both worlds. His mother was Cherokee. His father was white trader like his grandfather. He speaks many languages, knows many customs. This makes him good businessman, but also makes some people suspicious." Ruby absorbed this information thoughtfully. It explained Adam's careful balance between cultures, his ability to move easily between different worlds while belonging fully to neither. It also explained some of the isolation she sensed around Sweetwater Station. "What about Noah's mother?" Ruby asked carefully. "Was she white woman from back east like you?" Mary said simply. "Good woman, but not strong for this life. The loneliness, the harsh winters, the sickness, it was too much. She died giving birth to second baby. Baby died too." The tragedy explained so much about the quiet sadness Ruby had sensed in both Adam and Noah. They had lost not just a wife and mother, but an entire future that had died with her. That afternoon, as Noah napped peacefully for the first time in weeks, Ruby found herself alone with Adam in the main room of the trading post. He was working on the account books, his dark head bent over columns of figures while she mended a tear in one of Noah's shirts. The domestic scene felt both natural and strange. "Miss Ashton," Adam said suddenly, looking up from his ledger. "I owe you an apology." Ruby set down her sewing, surprised. "Whatever for? I was not entirely honest with you last night about the marriage contract," Adam continued, his expression serious. "While it's true that I never intended to force you into an unwanted union, I did hope that a wife might provide stability for Noah. What I didn't mention is that there are practical considerations beyond my son's health." Ruby felt a chill of apprehension. "What kind of practical considerations?" Adam rose from his desk and moved to the window, staring out at the vast prairie that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. "Sweetwater Station exists because it serves travelers and traders moving between territories. But the railroad is coming, Miss Ashton. Within 5 years, maybe less, the stagecoach routes will be obsolete. My business depends on adapting to those changes. I don't understand what this has to do with marriage," Ruby said quietly. "A man with an Indian name and mixed heritage faces certain limitations in business dealings," Adam explained, his voice carefully neutral. "A white wife provides respectability, social connections that could be crucial as the territory develops. Your father understood this when he suggested the marriage contract." Ruby felt as if she had been slapped. "So I am to be a business asset? A white face to make your enterprise more palatable to other white settlers?" Adam turned from the window, his expression pained. "That was the original logic, yes. But after yesterday, after seeing you with Noah—" He paused, running a hand through his hair. "Miss Ashton, I want you to understand that any arrangement between us would be based on much more than business considerations. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Thunderbear?" Ruby asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite the turmoil in her chest. A genuine partnership, Adam said simply. You need security and a place in the world. I need help building a future for my son and adapting my business to changing times. Noah needs the kind of care and affection that only a mother can provide. We could build something real together, something based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than romantic fantasy. Ruby studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or false sentiment. Instead, she saw only honest assessment of their mutual circumstances and genuine concern for his son's welfare. And if affection should develop naturally between us? She asked carefully. Then we would be fortunate indeed, Adam replied. But I would never expect or demand more than you are willing to give. Your comfort and happiness would be as important to me as Noah's health. Before Ruby could respond, Noah's voice called weakly from his room. They hurried to find him sitting up in bed, his face flushed with excitement despite his lingering fever. I had the most wonderful dream, he announced breathlessly. I dreamed it was Christmas morning, and Miss Ruby was here, and we all opened presents together like a real family. And I wasn't sick anymore, and Papa was laughing, and Miss Ruby was wearing a pretty dress. Ruby felt tears prick her eyes at the innocent longing in the boy's voice. That sounds like a lovely dream, Noah. It wasn't just a dream, was it? Noah asked with the piercing directness of childhood. Miss Ruby is going to stay and be part of our family, isn't she, Papa? Adam looked at Ruby, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes holding a question that went far deeper than business arrangements or practical considerations. I think, Ruby said slowly, reaching for Noah's small hand, that your dream might come true after all, if that's what you really want. It is, Noah said fiercely, gripping her fingers with surprising strength. More than anything. Please, Miss Ruby, please stay and be my mama. We need you so much. Ruby looked from Noah's fevered, hopeful face to Adam's carefully controlled expression and felt something settle into place in her chest. This was not the life she had planned, not the future she had imagined for herself. But sitting in this remote trading post, holding the hand of a sick little boy who had claimed her as family, she realized that sometimes the best things came disguised as obligations. Then I will stay, she said firmly. Not just for the winter, but for as long as you both want me. We'll be a family, Noah, a real family. The smile that spread across Noah's face was brighter than any Christmas morning. He threw his thin arms around Ruby's neck, hugging her with all the strength his recovering body could muster. Thank you, he whispered against her shoulder. Thank you for staying. Thank you for making me better. Thank you for making Papa smile again. Over Noah's head, Ruby met Adam's eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. Not love, perhaps, not yet, but possibility, hope, the foundation upon which something deeper and more lasting could be built. As the first blizzard of winter began to rage outside the windows of Sweetwater Station, sealing them together until spring, Ruby Ashton realized that she was no longer a reluctant bride fulfilling a dead man's contract. She was Miss Ruby, the lady who could heal with herbs and honey, who could sing away the nightmares and make Christmas dreams come true. And for the first time since leaving Boston, she found herself eager to discover what tomorrow might bring. The blizzard that had begun 3 days ago showed no signs of abating. Snow piled against the windows of Sweetwater Station in drifts that reached the sills, and the wind howled across the prairie with a ferocity that made the sturdy log walls groan and shift. Ruby had never experienced anything like the raw power of a Montana winter storm, but she was learning quickly that survival depended on constant vigilance and careful resource management. Inside the trading post, however, a different kind of storm was brewing. Noah's recovery had progressed remarkably over the past 2 weeks, his strength returning with each passing day under Ruby's dedicated care. But with his improved health came a restless energy that their confined quarters could barely contain. The boy who had once been content to lie quietly in bed now paced the small rooms like a caged wolf cub. desperate for activity and adventure. Miss Ruby. "I'm bored," Noah announced for the fourth time that morning, pressing his face against the frost-covered window. "When can I go outside and build a snow fort?" "When the storm passes and your father says it's safe," Ruby replied patiently, not looking up from the moccasins she was learning to repair under Mary's guidance. "Until then, we practice your letters and work on the Christmas decorations." Noah flopped dramatically onto the floor beside her chair. "I already know my letters, and we've made 17 pinecone ornaments. How many Christmas trees does Papa think we're going to have?" Ruby hid a smile at his theatrical despair. A healthy, energetic Noah was infinitely preferable to the sick, listless child she had first encountered, even if his boundless enthusiasm was challenging to manage in their cramped quarters. From across the room, Adam looked up from the harness he was mending with an expression that mixed fond exasperation with genuine concern. "Noah, Miss Ruby is right. This storm is too dangerous for anyone to venture outside. The wind alone could knock a grown man off his feet, but I'm not a grown man," Noah protested. "I'm small and low to the ground. The wind couldn't knock me over as easily." "That's exactly why it would be more dangerous for you," Adam explained with infinite patience. "In a blizzard like this, a person can become lost and freeze to death just 20 feet from their own door." Noah's face sobered at his father's serious tone, but Ruby could see the boy's restless energy still simmering beneath the surface. She set aside her sewing and moved to kneel beside him on the floor. "Noah, would you like to learn something special that might help pass the time?" "What kind of special?" Noah asked, his interest immediately piqued. Ruby glanced at Adam, who nodded encouragingly. "Would you like to learn how to read Cherokee characters? Your father could teach us both." Noah's eyes widened with excitement. "Papa, you know Indian writing." Adam's expression grew thoughtful. "I know some Cherokee syllabary, yes. My grandmother taught me when I was about your age. But it's been many years since I practiced." "Please, Papa," Noah begged, scrambling to his feet. "I want to learn to write like the Indians do. Miss Ruby wants to learn too." Ruby watched Adam's face as he considered the request. She could see him weighing the value of preserving his cultural heritage against the practical realities of life in the territories, where Indian identity could sometimes be more liability than asset. "Very well," Adam said finally, "but we'll need to make charcoal for writing and find something suitable to write on." The next hour was spent in preparation, with Mary contributing strips of birch bark and Adam carefully preparing writing implements from charred wood. Ruby found herself fascinated by the process, watching as Adam's hands moved with practiced ease, despite his claim of rustiness. "The Cherokee syllabary was created by a man named Sequoia," Adam explained as he demonstrated the first characters. "Each symbol represents a sound, not just a letter like English writing. It made it possible for Cherokee people to read and write in their own language." Noah bent over his piece of bark with intense concentration, carefully copying the symbols his father drew. Ruby worked beside him, marveling at the elegant simplicity of the writing system. "This is beautiful," she murmured, studying the graceful curves and lines. "How do you write family in Cherokee?" Adam's hand paused for a moment before he drew a series of symbols. "Duyuktiv," he said softly. "It means family, but also the people who belong together." Ruby practiced the word carefully, her fingers learning the unfamiliar shapes. There was something deeply moving about learning to write in Adam's ancestral language, as if she were being welcomed into a sacred trust. "Miss Ruby," Noah said suddenly, looking up from his writing practice, "are you going to take Papa's name when you marry him?" The question hung in the air like smoke from the fire. Ruby's hand stilled on her writing, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. She and Adam had spoken of practical arrangements and mutual benefits, but they had not discussed the intimate details of their eventual union. "Noah," Adam said carefully, "Miss Ruby and I haven't made all those decisions yet, but you are going to get married, aren't you?" Noah pressed. "I mean, really married, not just pretend married." Ruby glanced at Adam, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his dark eyes. Their arrangement had been presented as a business partnership, a practical solution to mutual needs. But living together day after day, working side by side to care for Noah and manage the household, had created an intimacy that neither had anticipated. "Marriage is a serious commitment, Noah," Ruby said gently. "It requires careful thought and planning. Mama always said that the most important things in life are worth doing, even if they're scary." Noah replied with the wisdom that sometimes emerged from his 8-year-old observations. "And I think you and Papa are both scared of good things because bad things happened before." The simple statement hit Ruby like a physical blow. Noah was right, of course. She was terrified of opening her heart fully, just as Adam was terrified of risking his son's happiness on another fragile white woman who might not be strong enough for frontier life. Before either adult could respond to Noah's perceptive comment, the sound of horses and voices outside made them all freeze. In weather like this, only the most desperate travelers would attempt to reach Sweetwater Station. Adam moved immediately to the rifle rack, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. "Mary, take Noah to the back room," he instructed quietly. "Miss Ruby, step away from the windows." Ruby felt her heart begin to race as the implications hit her. They were completely isolated, miles from any help, with a blizzard raging outside. If these visitors meant harm, there would be no escape and no rescue. Heavy boots stamped on the porch, followed by loud pounding on the door. "Thunderbear!" a rough voice called. "Open up! We need shelter and supplies." Adam approached the door cautiously, rifle in hand. "Who's there?" "State your business. Name's Briggs, and I've got 5 men with me," the voice replied. "We're tracking horse thieves, and this storm caught us. Open the door before we freeze to death." Ruby saw Adam's jaw tighten with suspicion. Horse thieves were common in the territories, but so were men who claimed to be tracking them while actually being thieves themselves. "How many horses are you riding?" Adam called back. 6, came the reply. "And they're about done in. We need shelter for them too." Adam moved to the window and peered out through a small gap in the frost. Ruby saw his expression grow even more grim. "What is it?" she whispered. "The horses are stolen," Adam said quietly. "I can see the double bar brand from here. That's Samuel Morrison's ranch, 50 miles south. He doesn't hire drifters like these men." The pounding on the door resumed, more violently this time. "Thunderbear, we know you're in there. Open this door or we'll break it down." Ruby felt terror grip her chest. They were trapped with Noah, facing 6 armed men who were clearly criminals. The storm that had seemed like a cozy inconvenience suddenly became a deadly trap. "Papa!" Noah's voice came from the doorway where he stood, despite Mary's attempts to keep him hidden. "What's happening? Go back with Mary," Adam ordered without taking his eyes off the door. "Now, is it bad men?" Noah asked, his voice small and frightened. "We don't know yet," Ruby said, moving to put herself between the boy and the door. "But we're going to be very careful." The door shuddered under renewed assault, and Ruby heard the sound of wood beginning to splinter. Adam raised his rifle, his face set in grim determination. "There's a root cellar beneath the floor in Mary's room," he said quickly to Ruby. "If things go badly, take Noah there and don't come out until I come for you." "What about you?" Ruby demanded. "I'll hold them off as long as I can," Adam replied simply. "They want supplies and shelter. Maybe I can give them what they need and send them on their way." The door burst open in a crash of splintered wood and driving snow. 6 men stumbled inside, stamping and cursing, their faces hidden beneath heavy beards and frost-covered scarves. They were all armed, and their eyes moved around the room with the practiced assessment of predators. "Well, well," the apparent leader said, pushing back his hat to reveal a scarred face and cold blue eyes. "Looks like we found ourselves a nice warm nest. And what have we here?" His gaze fixed on Ruby with an expression that made her skin crawl. "A pretty white woman keeping house with an Indian. How interesting." "You can shelter here until the storm passes," Adam said evenly, keeping his rifle trained on the group. "Then you move on." "I don't want trouble." Briggs laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Oh, but trouble's what we brought, Thunderbear. See, we know all about you. Half-breed trader with more money than sense, living out here with nobody to help him. And now it looks like you've got yourself a woman and a boy to worry about too. Ruby's blood turned to ice as she realized these men had come here deliberately. This wasn't a chance encounter or desperate shelter-seeking. They had planned this. What do you want? Adam asked quietly. Everything, Briggs replied simply. Your money, your supplies, your horses, and maybe some entertainment to warm us up during this cold spell. His eyes moved meaningfully to Ruby. That's not going to happen, Adam said, his voice deadly calm. Oh, I think it is, Briggs countered. See, there's 6 of us and 1 of you, and you've got precious cargo to protect. He gestured toward Ruby and the doorway where Noah had appeared again, despite orders to stay hidden. Ruby felt the situation spiraling toward violence and knew she had to act. These men clearly intended harm regardless of Adam's cooperation. But she also knew that any resistance would put Noah in mortal danger. Please, she said, stepping forward slightly. We'll give you whatever you need. Just don't hurt the boy. Briggs's attention focused on her with predatory interest. Well, aren't you the reasonable one? What's your name, pretty lady? Ruby, she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Ruby, Briggs repeated, savoring the name. That's a real nice name. Tell me, Ruby, what's a fine white woman like you doing shacked up with an Indian in the middle of nowhere? She's my wife, Adam said firmly, and Ruby felt something shift in her chest at the quiet authority in his voice. Your wife? Briggs laughed again. Well, that's real romantic. An Indian with a white wife. Some folks might call that against nature. Some folks would be wrong, Ruby said with more courage than she felt. My husband and I live peacefully here, harming no one. The word husband felt strange on her tongue, but also strangely right. In this moment of crisis, all pretense fell away. Adam was her husband in every way that mattered, and she would defend that truth with her life. Husband, Briggs mused. Well then, maybe we need to discuss the terms of hospitality with the man of the house. Boys, why don't you make yourselves comfortable while I have a private conversation with our hosts? The other men began spreading through the room, examining the trading post's inventory with obvious greed. One of them grabbed a bottle of whiskey from a shelf and took a long drink. That's enough, Adam said sharply, raising his rifle. Take what you need for the storm and leave. Or what? Briggs challenged. You'll shoot us all? With your wife and boys standing right here in the line of fire. Ruby realized with sick certainty that these men had no intention of leaving anyone alive to report their crimes. They would take everything of value, including Noah and herself, and leave Adam's body for the wolves. But then Noah did something that changed everything. The little boy stepped out from behind Mary, walked directly to Ruby's side, and took her hand with calm determination. Mister, he said in his clear young voice, addressing Briggs directly. You're scaring my mama, and my papa doesn't like it when people scare my mama. The simple words, spoken with such innocent courage, created a moment of stunned silence. Here was an 8-year-old boy, recently recovered from serious illness, standing up to 6 armed criminals to protect the woman he had claimed as family. Your mama, Briggs said, his voice suddenly uncertain. But she's white. So am I, partly, Noah replied matter-of-factly. And so is my papa, partly. But mostly we're family, and families protect each other. In that instant, Ruby understood what Noah was doing. With the wisdom that sometimes came from innocence, he was forcing these men to see them not as targets, but as a real family. A white woman, a mixed-race man, and their child standing together against the storm. Noah, Adam said quietly, pride and terror warring in his voice. Come back here, son. No, Papa, Noah said firmly, never letting go of Ruby's hand. I'm staying with Mama. We're all staying together. Ruby felt tears sting her eyes as she looked down at this brave little boy who had chosen to stand with them rather than hide in safety. Whatever happened next, she knew that Noah's storm had just shown them all what family really meant. The tension in the trading post stretched like a bowstring ready to snap. Noah's small hand remained firmly clasped in Ruby's, his young face set with determination that belied his 8 years. The 6 outlaws shifted uneasily, clearly unsettled by the boy's unexpected courage and the family solidarity it represented. Briggs studied the 3 of them with calculating eyes. His original plan of easy intimidation complicated by this display of unified defiance. "Well now," Briggs said slowly, his voice taking on a different tone. "Seems like we got ourselves a real family here. That changes things some." Ruby felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps Noah's brave stand had reached something human in these desperate men. But that hope died quickly when she saw Briggs exchange meaningful glances with his companions. "Changes things how?" Adam asked, his rifle still trained on the group, but his voice carefully neutral. "Makes it more interesting," Briggs replied with a cold smile. "See, a woman alone might run off at the first chance. But a woman with a child to protect, well, she's got real motivation to cooperate." The implied threat hung in the air like smoke from a poisoned fire. Ruby's grip on Noah's hand tightened involuntarily, and she felt the boy's small fingers squeeze back in reassurance. "What exactly are you proposing?" Ruby asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Simple enough," Briggs said, settling into one of the chairs near the fire as if he owned the place. "We're going to wait out this storm in comfort. You folks are going to provide that comfort. Food, warmth, supplies, and whatever other hospitality we might require." One of the other men, a thin fellow with nervous eyes, moved closer to the shelves of trading goods. "Boss, look at all this stuff." "We could load up good here." "Patience, Jake," Briggs cautioned. "No need to rush. We got all the time in the world." Mary appeared silently in the doorway, her dark eyes taking in the situation with the quick assessment of someone who had survived many dangers. She carried a large pot of stew that had been simmering on the back burner, and her presence seemed to shift the atmosphere slightly. "You men hungry?" she asked in her accented English, setting the pot down with deliberate calm. "Storm makes everyone hungry. I make plenty food." Briggs studied Mary with interest. "Well, aren't you the helpful one?" "What's your story, grandmother?" "I work here," Mary replied simply. "I cook, I clean, I help with boy when he's sick." "Now boy's better, but still need good food." Ruby watched in amazement as Mary began ladling stew into bowls with matter-of-fact efficiency. The older woman's calm acceptance of the situation seemed to confuse the outlaws, who had clearly expected fear and resistance. "Mary's right," Ruby said, following the woman's lead. "You must be cold and hungry after riding in this storm. Let me help serve the meal." Adam shot her a sharp look, but Ruby had caught on to Mary's strategy. By treating the men as unwelcome but temporary guests rather than mortal enemies, they might avoid the immediate violence that seemed to be simmering just beneath the surface. "Now that's what I call hospitality," Briggs said approvingly. "See, boys, these folks understand how to treat visitors proper." As Ruby moved to help Mary serve the food, one of the younger outlaws grabbed her wrist roughly. "You're a real pretty thing, ain't you? Been a long time since we seen a white woman." The man's grip was painful, but before Ruby could react, Noah stepped forward with surprising speed and kicked the outlaw hard in the shin. "Don't touch my mama," he declared fiercely. "Papa says only family gets to touch family." The outlaw cursed and raised his hand to strike the boy, but Adam's rifle swung toward him with deadly precision. "Touch my son and die," Adam said in a voice that carried absolute conviction. Now, Briggs intervened quickly, clearly worried about the situation escalating beyond his control. "No need for violence over a misunderstanding. Tommy, keep your hands to yourself. We're guests here after all." Tommy released Ruby's wrist with obvious reluctance, but his eyes remained fixed on her with predatory interest. Ruby rubbed her wrist where his fingers had left red marks, fighting down the urge to retreat to the safety of Adam's side. "Thank you," she said quietly to Noah, who beamed with pride at her gratitude. The next hour passed in tense civility as the outlaws ate Mary's stew and gradually warmed themselves by the fire. Ruby noted that they were careful to keep their weapons close and their eyes on all the exits. These were not desperate amateurs, but experienced criminals who knew how to control the situation. "Tell me, Thunderbear," Briggs said as he finished his second bowl of stew, What's a smart man like you doing running a trading post in the middle of nowhere? Seems like a waste of talent. It's honest work, Adam replied evenly. It provides for my family. Family, Briggs repeated thoughtfully. That's real important to you, ain't it? Man will do almost anything to protect his family. Ruby felt ice form in her stomach as she recognized the veiled threat. These men had quickly identified Adam's vulnerability and were prepared to exploit it ruthlessly. Most decent men feel that way, Adam said carefully. Decent, Briggs mused. That's an interesting word. Some folks might say it ain't decent for a white woman to marry an Indian. Might say it goes against the natural order of things. Some folks say a lot of ignorant things, Ruby interjected before Adam could respond. What matters is how people treat each other, not the color of their skin. Briggs turned his attention to her with renewed interest. You really believe that, don't you? You're not just playing house with the Indian. Adam is my husband, Ruby said firmly, and again felt the strange rightness of the words. Noah is my son. This is my family, and I'll defend it with my life if necessary. Brave words, Briggs acknowledged. But let's see how brave you feel when the stakes get real. Outside, the storm continued to rage with unabated fury. The wind howled around the building like a living thing, and the temperature continued to drop. Ruby realized with growing dread that they could be trapped together for days, and each hour increased the likelihood of violence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Papa, Noah said suddenly, tugging on Adam's sleeve. I need to use the privy. Adam's jaw tightened as he realized the implications. The privy was outside, connected to the main building by a covered walkway. In this storm, even that short journey could be treacherous. It can wait, Adam said firmly. No, it can't. Noah insisted with the urgency that only a child could convey. I really need to go. Briggs looked up from his contemplation of the fire with sudden interest. Well, now that's a problem, ain't it? Can't have the boy making a mess indoors. I'll take him, Ruby offered quickly, seeing an opportunity to get Noah away from the dangerous situation. If only temporarily. Oh, I don't think so, Briggs said smoothly. Too easy for accidents to happen in weather like this. People get lost, freeze to death, all sorts of unfortunate things. No, I think the boy's papa should escort him. Make sure he gets back safe and sound. The trap was obvious. Separating Adam from his weapons and his family would leave Ruby and Noah completely vulnerable. But Noah's need was genuine and urgent. I'll go with them, Ruby said. Now that's not practical either, Briggs replied. Storm like this, it's dangerous for a lady. You just stay here where it's warm and safe. Adam's eyes met Ruby's across the room, and she saw him weighing impossible choices. Leave his family unprotected or risk Noah's health and dignity. I have an idea, Mary interjected quietly from her place by the stove. We have chamber pot in back room. We can use that until storm passes. Ruby felt a wave of gratitude toward the older woman's practical wisdom. That's perfect. Noah, come with me. Now hold on, Tommy protested, still nursing his bruised shin. Nobody goes anywhere without permission. The boy needs relief, Briggs said after a moment's consideration. Let the woman take him to the back room. But the door stays open and you come right back. Ruby took Noah's hand and led him toward the back of the trading post, acutely aware of the watching eyes behind them. Once in the small storage room that Mary used for personal quarters, Ruby quickly found the chamber pot and helped Noah with his needs. Miss Ruby, Noah whispered as she straightened his clothes. Are those bad men going to hurt us? Ruby knelt to his level, taking his small face in her hands. I don't know, sweetheart, but I want you to remember something very important. No matter what happens, your papa and I love you more than anything in the world. I know, Noah said solemnly. And I love you too. Both of you. That's why I'm not scared. His simple faith in their family bond brought tears to Ruby's eyes. You were very brave earlier standing up for me like that. But if things get dangerous, I need you to promise me you'll do exactly what Papa or I tell you to do. I promise, Noah said seriously. Are we really a family now, Miss Ruby? A real family? Yes, Ruby said without hesitation. We are absolutely a real family. Nothing and no one can change that. When they returned to the main room, Ruby found the situation had deteriorated further. The outlaws had discovered Adam's cache of firearms and were examining them with professional interest. Nice collection, Briggs commented, hefting a rifle that probably cost more than most men made in a year. You must do real well in the trading business. Those weapons are for protection and hunting, Adam said tightly. Living out here, a man needs to be prepared. Oh, we understand preparation, Jake said with a nasty laugh. We're real prepared ourselves. Ruby noticed that Mary had disappeared from the main room, though she wasn't sure when or where the older woman had gone. She hoped Mary was finding somewhere safe to hide, or perhaps looking for weapons of her own. You know what I think? Briggs said, settling back in his chair with the rifle across his knees. I think we're going to be real comfortable here for the next few days. Good food, warm shelter, interesting company. The storm won't last more than another day or two, Adam said carefully. These prairie blizzards blow themselves out quickly? Oh, I hope you're wrong about that, Briggs replied with false sincerity. I'm finding this arrangement quite enjoyable. Ain't often we get to experience such fine hospitality. Ruby felt Noah press closer to her side as the menace in Briggs's voice became more apparent. The pretense of civilized behavior was wearing thin, and she could see the predatory nature of these men beginning to show through. In fact, Briggs continued, his eyes fixed on Ruby, I'm thinking we might extend our visit even after the weather clears. There's a lot to appreciate in a place like this. That won't be possible, Adam said flatly. You're welcome to shelter and supplies, but then you need to move on. Briggs laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. Oh, but I think you'll find we can be very persuasive about what's possible and what ain't. The threat hung in the air like the blade of an axe waiting to fall. Ruby realized that they had reached the moment of truth. These men had no intention of leaving peacefully, and any pretense of hospitality was about to end. But then Mary reappeared from the back rooms, moving with purpose toward the stove. In her hands was a large iron pot that she set down with deliberate care. More stew ready, she announced calmly. Everyone's still hungry. Well now, that's thoughtful, Briggs said, though his attention remained fixed on intimidating Adam. Boys, help yourselves. As the outlaws moved toward the stove, Ruby noticed something that made her heart race with sudden hope. Mary's movements were deliberate and precise, and the pot she had brought forward was different from the one she had used earlier. This one had a tight-fitting lid, and steam was rising from around the edges in a way that suggested more than just hot stew. Mary caught Ruby's eye for just a moment and gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the door. Then the older woman lifted the lid of the pot, and a cloud of scalding steam erupted into the faces of the nearest outlaws. Now! Mary shouted in Cherokee, and chaos erupted in the trading post. The scalding steam hit Jake and Tommy square in their faces, and their screams of pain pierced the air like banshee wails. Both men staggered backward, clawing at their burned skin and temporarily blinded by the superheated vapor that Mary had unleashed from her improvised weapon. In the split second of chaos that followed, Adam dove for his rifle while Ruby scooped Noah into her arms and pressed him against the wall behind the overturned table. "You witch!" Briggs roared, swinging his pistol toward Mary. But the older woman had already melted back into the shadows near the kitchen, moving with the silent grace of someone who had spent decades avoiding danger. The remaining 3 outlaws who had escaped the steam attack scrambled for their weapons, but Adam was faster. His rifle barked once, and the man nearest the door spun around and collapsed, clutching his shoulder. The sharp crack of gunfire in the enclosed space was deafening, and Noah buried his face against Ruby's shoulder. "Stay down!" Adam shouted to Ruby as he worked the rifle's action, but his warning came too late. Briggs had recovered from his initial shock and was bringing his own weapon to bear. Ruby saw the outlaw leader's pistol swing toward Adam and acted without thinking. She grabbed the heavy iron skillet that Mary had left near the fire and hurled it with all her strength. The cast iron caught Briggs in the temple with a sickening thud, and he dropped like a felled tree. "Behind you!" Noah cried out in his high, clear voice. Adam spun, just as one of the steam-scalded outlaws, half-blind but still dangerous, charged at him with a knife. The blade whistled past Adam's throat, missing by inches, and the two men crashed into the trading post's merchandise shelves in a tangle of flying goods and grappling limbs. Ruby set Noah down quickly and looked frantically for another weapon. Her hands closed around a heavy wooden rolling pin just as the remaining uninjured outlaw decided she represented the easiest target. He lunged toward her with a leering grin, but Ruby was no longer the sheltered Boston lady who had arrived at Sweetwater Station weeks ago. "Noah, get to Mary," she shouted, then met the outlaw's charge with the rolling pin swinging like a club. The hardwood connected with his wrist with a sharp crack, and his pistol went flying across the room. The man howled in pain and rage, cradling what was obviously a broken wrist, but his good hand still reached for the knife at his belt. Ruby backed away, clutching the rolling pin, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it over the sounds of combat. "You're going to pay for that, you Indian-loving whore," the outlaw snarled, advancing on her with the blade gleaming in the firelight. But before he could close the distance, a gunshot echoed from the kitchen area, and the man jerked violently before toppling forward onto his face. Behind him stood Mary, holding a smoking derringer that looked tiny in her weathered hands. "Mary!" Ruby gasped, staring at the older woman in amazement. "Old woman, not so helpless," Mary replied calmly, checking to make sure her target was down. "Cherokee women know how to fight when family threatened." Across the room, Adam had gained the upper hand in his struggle with the knife-wielding outlaw. A series of precise blows left his opponent unconscious on the floor among the scattered trading goods. Adam stood slowly, bleeding from a cut on his arm, but otherwise intact. "Is everyone all right?" he called, his eyes immediately seeking Ruby and Noah. "We're fine," Ruby replied, though her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the rolling pin. "Mary saved us." Noah emerged from behind the counter where Mary had hidden him, his eyes wide with the excitement and terror of the battle he had just witnessed. "Papa, you were so brave. And Miss Ruby hit that bad man with the skillet. And Mary shot the other one." Adam moved quickly to check on each of them, his hands gentle as he examined Ruby for injuries and pulled Noah into a fierce embrace. "I thought I was going to lose you both," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "We're a family," Noah said matter-of-factly. "Families don't lose each other. They fight together." Ruby felt tears sting her eyes at the simple truth in the boy's words. During the fight, she hadn't thought about her own safety or the proper behavior expected of a lady. She had thought only of protecting Noah and Adam, of defending the family they had built together. "What do we do with them?" Ruby asked, looking at the fallen outlaws. Briggs was unconscious but breathing. The man Adam had shot was moaning and holding his wounded shoulder, and the one Mary had shot was clearly dead. The other two were still writhing on the floor, their faces burned by the steam. "First, we secure the live ones," Adam said grimly. "Mary, do we have enough rope?" "In storage room," Mary confirmed. "I get it." As they worked to tie up the surviving outlaws, Ruby found herself studying Adam with new eyes. She had seen him as a gentle trader, a devoted father, a man struggling to build a life between two worlds. But during the fight, she had glimpsed something harder and more dangerous beneath his civilized exterior. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" she asked as they dragged the unconscious Briggs away from the fire. Adam's expression grew distant. "When you're half Cherokee in the territories, you learn early that some people will always see you as a threat. My grandfather taught me that a man who won't fight for his family doesn't deserve to have one." The wounded outlaw who had been shot in the shoulder was trying to stem the bleeding with a torn piece of his shirt. He looked up at them with a mixture of pain and hatred. "You ain't heard the last of this, Thunderbear," he gasped. "We got friends, and they'll come looking when we don't show up. Your friends will find 6 graves and a story about horse thieves who tried to rob the wrong trading post," Adam replied coolly. The territorial marshal will be very interested to hear about stolen horses and attempted murder. You can't prove nothing, the wounded man protested. It's your word against dead men, Mary interjected dryly. Dead men not talk much. Ruby realized with a chill that Mary was suggesting they kill all the survivors rather than risk future revenge. The frontier was a harsh place where justice was often dispensed at the end of a gun rather than in a courtroom. We're not murderers, Ruby said firmly. We'll turn them over to the authorities when the storm ends. Adam looked at her with something that might have been admiration. Ruby's right. We defend ourselves when we have to, but we don't become what they are. Outside, the wind seemed to be losing some of its fury, though snow continued to fall heavily. The worst of the blizzard was passing, which meant they would soon be able to send word to the nearest marshal's office. How long until we can travel? Ruby asked, checking on Noah, who had curled up near the fire with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Another day, maybe 2. Adam replied. Depends on how much snow has drifted across the roads. The next several hours passed in tense vigilance as they took turns watching the bound prisoners. Ruby found herself unable to sleep, her mind replaying the violence of the fight and the moment when she had thrown the skillet at Briggs. She had never imagined herself capable of such decisive action in a crisis. Ruby, Adam said softly, settling beside her on the bench where she sat staring into the fire. You saved my life tonight. That skillet throw was perfectly timed. I didn't think, Ruby admitted. I just saw him aiming at you and reacted. Is that what frontier life is like? Violence always lurking just beneath the surface? Sometimes, Adam acknowledged, but not always. Most of the time, it's just ordinary people trying to build something good in a hard place. Tonight was an exception, not the rule. Ruby studied his profile in the firelight, noting the exhaustion lines around his eyes and the careful way he held his injured arm. Adam, when you called me your wife earlier, did you mean it? Or was it just something to say in front of those men? Adam turned to face her fully, his dark eyes serious. I meant it more than I've meant anything in my life. Ruby, what we've built here isn't just a business arrangement anymore. At least not for me. Not for me either, Ruby said quietly. When I saw that man threatening you, I realized that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about paying my father's debt and became about protecting the man I love. The words hung between them like a bridge finally built across a dangerous chasm. Adam's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with her own. I love you too, he said simply. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you knelt beside Noah's bed and made him believe in getting well again. From his nest of blankets, Noah's sleepy voice drifted toward them. Are you two finally going to get married for real now? Because I've been waiting forever for you to figure out that you love each other. Ruby and Adam looked at each other and began to laugh. Quietly at first, then with the slightly hysterical edge that came from surviving mortal danger and discovering unexpected joy on the same night. Yes, Noah, Ruby said, still laughing. I think we're finally going to get married for real. Good, Noah mumbled, already half asleep again. Because I was getting tired of pretending I didn't know you wanted to kiss each other. 2 days later, the storm finally broke, leaving the world outside Sweetwater Station transformed into a crystalline wonderland of snow and ice. The drifts were indeed deep, but the main road remained passable for riders willing to brave the cold. Adam saddled his strongest horse and rode to the nearest settlement to send word to the territorial marshal about their prisoners. While he was gone, Ruby and Mary worked together to restore order to the trading post. The fight had left scars, bullet holes in the walls, broken merchandise, bloodstains on the wooden floor, but the structure was sound and the essential supplies intact. Mary, Ruby said as they scrubbed the last of the blood from the floorboards, I owe you my life, and Noah's life. That steam attack was brilliant. Mary paused in her cleaning and looked at Ruby with eyes that held decades of hard-won wisdom. You good woman, Miss Ruby. You fight for family like Cherokee woman. You belong here now. I want to belong here. Ruby replied honestly. "This place, this life, these people, they've become everything to me." "Good," Mary said with satisfaction. "Because Mr. Adam, he needs strong woman, not like first wife. She was sweet girl, but not strong enough for this life. You different." "You have warrior heart?" Ruby thought about Mary's words as she worked. She had indeed changed during her time at Sweetwater Station. The frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach had become someone harder, more capable, more certain of her own strength. When Adam returned that evening, he brought news that the marshal would arrive within the week to collect the prisoners. He also brought something else, a small leather pouch that he placed carefully on the table. "What is it?" Ruby asked, noting the ceremonial way he handled the pouch. "Cherokee wedding rings," Adam explained, opening the pouch to reveal 2 bands of intricately carved silver. "They belong to my grandparents. I've been saving them for when I found someone worthy of wearing them." Ruby's breath caught as she examined the beautiful metalwork. The rings were covered in traditional Cherokee symbols that spoke of love, protection, and eternal commitment. "Adam, they're beautiful. But are you certain?" "We haven't had time to plan a proper wedding. We've had weeks to plan our marriage," Adam corrected gently. "The ceremony is just making it official." Noah bounced excitedly around them as they discussed wedding plans. "Can I help with the ceremony? Can I carry the rings? Can I wear my best shirt?" "You can do all of those things," Ruby assured him, pulling him into a hug. "Because you're going to be the most important person at our wedding." "Why am I the most important?" Noah asked, though he was clearly pleased by the designation. "Because you're the one who brought us together," Ruby explained. "You're the one who taught us what family really means." 3 days later, as the sun set behind the snow-covered hills surrounding Sweetwater Station, Ruby Ashton became Ruby Thunderbear in a ceremony that blended Cherokee traditions with frontier practicality. Mary had woven wildflowers from her carefully preserved stores into Ruby's hair, and Adam wore the traditional shirt that had belonged to his grandfather. The territorial minister, who had arrived with the marshal, performed the legal ceremony, but it was the Cherokee blessing that Mary spoke over them in her native tongue that felt like the true binding of their souls. "She says you are now one spirit in 2 bodies," Adam translated as Mary finished the ancient words, "and that your children will carry the strength of both your peoples." Noah stepped forward with the rings, his face solemn with the importance of his role. "I give these rings to my new mama and my papa, so they remember they promised to love each other and take care of me forever." As Ruby slipped the silver band onto her finger, she felt the last piece of her new life click into place. She was no longer Ruby Ashton of Boston, reluctant bride fulfilling a dead man's contract. She was Ruby Thunderbear of Sweetwater Station, wife to Adam, mother to Noah, defender of her family against all threats. The woman who had once been promised to an Indian as payment for debt had instead found the greatest treasure of all, a love worth fighting for, a family worth protecting, and a home where she truly belonged. 5 months later, April 1880, the morning sun streamed through the newly installed glass windows of Sweetwater Station, illuminating the trading post that had been transformed over the winter months. Where bullet holes had once marred the walls, fresh timber now gleamed with Adam's careful craftsmanship. The shelves that had been destroyed in the fight with the outlaws had been rebuilt stronger and more efficiently organized. Ruby had insisted on adding decorative touches that reflected both Cherokee heritage and frontier practicality, creating a space that felt both welcoming and distinctly their own. Ruby stood at the large kitchen window, her hands resting on the gentle swell of her belly that had become noticeable over the past few weeks. The child growing within her was still small, but its presence filled her with a joy so profound it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. She was carrying Adam's baby, a new life that would bind their family together in ways that even their Cherokee wedding ceremony could not. Each morning brought new sensations, new awareness of the miracle taking place within her body. "Good morning, Mrs. Thunderbear," Adam said softly. wrapping his arms around her from behind and placing his large hands over hers on her stomach. The title still sent a thrill through Ruby every time she heard it, especially when spoken in Adam's deep voice with such obvious love and pride. His daily ritual of greeting both her and their unborn child had become one of her favorite moments. "Good morning, husband," Ruby replied, leaning back against his chest and enjoying the solid warmth of his embrace. "Your son has been very active this morning. I think he's as eager for spring as the rest of us. He's been practicing his kicks since before dawn." "How do you know it's a son?" Adam asked, his breath warm against her ear as he nuzzled her neck in the intimate way that had become second nature between them. His hands moved gently across her belly, feeling for the movements that had become increasingly strong. "Because he kicks exactly like Noah when he's excited about something," Ruby replied with a laugh. "Strong and determined and completely convinced that the world should bend to his will. Mary says Cherokee babies always announce their personalities early." From the main room came the sound of Noah's voice, animated and cheerful as he explained something to their newest guest. Ruby and Adam had established a tradition of taking in travelers who needed shelter, but they were much more careful about screening their visitors since the incident with the outlaws. Word had spread throughout the territory about Sweetwater Station's hospitality, but also about its defenders' fierce protection of family. "Miss Charlotte, you should see how Papa built the new chicken coop," Noah was saying, with the enthusiasm of a 9-year-old tour guide. "He made it so the foxes can't get in, and there's a special door that closes automatically when it gets dark. And the chickens lay more eggs now because they feel safe." Charlotte Whitman was a schoolteacher from Philadelphia who had come west to establish a school in the growing settlement of Bear Creek, 15 miles from Sweetwater Station. She had arrived 3 days ago with letters of introduction from the Territorial Education Board and a determination that reminded Ruby strongly of her younger self. The woman carried herself with the careful dignity of someone trying to prove she belonged in a world that questioned her presence. "Noah, let Miss Whitman finish her breakfast," Ruby called as she and Adam entered the main room. "She needs her strength for the journey to Bear Creek. The roads are still challenging this time of year." Charlotte looked up from her plate of eggs and bacon with a smile that held both gratitude and a touch of envy. Her traveling dress was practical, but showed signs of the hard journey west, and her face bore the determined expression of someone chasing a dream despite significant obstacles. "Oh, I hope you don't mind me saying, Mrs. Thunderbear, but you have created something quite remarkable here. The warmth, the sense of family, the way you've blended different cultures so seamlessly. It's exactly what I hope to accomplish in Bear Creek, though I confess I'm not entirely sure how to begin." Ruby felt heat rise in her cheeks at the praise, but also sympathy for the younger woman's uncertainty. "We've been fortunate to find each other," she said simply. "Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, rather than the ones we're born into. As for beginning, I've learned that you start with small acts of kindness and let everything else grow from there." "Speaking of family," Adam said, settling into his chair at the head of the table, "I received word yesterday that my cousin James will be arriving next week with his new bride. They're moving from the Cherokee Nation to establish a horse ranch in the northern part of the territory. His letter mentions they're hoping to find acceptance in a community where mixed marriages aren't viewed with suspicion." "More family!" Noah exclaimed, bouncing in his seat with excitement that made his breakfast fork clatter against his plate. "Will they have children? I can teach them about drawing and building things and taking care of sick animals. And I can show them how to write Cherokee words." Ruby smiled at Noah's excitement while noting how Charlotte's eyes widened with interest at the mention of Cherokee writing. Over the winter, he had grown several inches and gained the robust health that came from proper nutrition and the security of being deeply loved. His artistic talents continued to flourish, and he had begun teaching some of the local settler children basic drawing techniques when their families stopped at the trading post. "They don't have children yet," Adam replied, his own pleasure evident in his voice. But James mentioned in his letter that they're hoping to start a family soon. You'll have plenty of opportunities to be a helpful big brother to both our new baby and any children they might have. The mention of being a big brother made Noah's face light up with anticipation. He had been thrilled when Ruby and Adam told him about the coming baby, immediately appointing himself as the child's protector and teacher. The boy had spent hours planning elaborate scenarios for all the things he would teach his younger sibling. "I've been thinking about names," Noah announced seriously, setting down his fork to give the matter his full attention. "If it's a boy, we could call him Running Bear, because bears are strong and fast and protect their families. If it's a girl, maybe Flying Eagle, because eagles are smart and brave like Mama, and they can see everything from way up high." Charlotte laughed delightedly at Noah's suggestions, her formal demeanor softening in the face of childish enthusiasm. "Those are beautiful names, Noah. Do you speak Cherokee as well as English? I've heard it's a remarkably sophisticated language." "Papa's been teaching me," Noah said proudly, straightening in his chair with the importance of his accomplishment. "And Miss Mama, has been learning too. We practice together every evening after supper. Papa says it's important to know both languages so I can talk to all kinds of people." Ruby felt a warm glow at being called Mama so naturally. The transition from Miss Ruby to Mama had happened gradually over the winter months, but it never failed to touch her heart. Noah had claimed her as his mother completely, and she had embraced the role with fierce dedication. "That's wonderful," Charlotte said with genuine admiration. "Preserving cultural traditions is so important, especially in territories where different peoples are learning to live together. I hope to incorporate multiple cultural perspectives into my curriculum at Bear Creek." After breakfast, as Charlotte prepared for the final leg of her journey to Bear Creek, Ruby found herself standing on the front porch of Sweetwater Station, marveling at the transformation that spring had brought to the landscape. The endless white of winter had given way to rolling hills covered in new grass and wildflowers that painted the prairie in brilliant colors. The creek that gave the station its name bubbled cheerfully nearby, swollen with snowmelt from the distant mountains. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Charlotte said, joining Ruby on the porch as Adam loaded her trunk onto the waiting wagon with practiced efficiency. "I can understand why you chose to make your life here. There's something about this place that feels like possibility itself." "I didn't choose it at first," Ruby admitted, watching the morning light dance across the water. "I was sent here to fulfill an obligation, to pay a debt. I thought my life was ending when I stepped off that stagecoach. But sometimes the best things in life come disguised as burdens we don't want to carry." Charlotte studied Ruby's face with the keen perception of someone trained to understand human nature. Her expression held curiosity, mixed with something that might have been hope for her own uncertain future. "And now you can't imagine being anywhere else," she observed. "Now I can't imagine being anyone else," Ruby corrected thoughtfully. "The woman who arrived here last October was lost, frightened, completely unprepared for frontier life. She existed day to day, afraid of her own shadow. The woman I am now truly lives, breathes, fights for what matters." As Charlotte's wagon disappeared down the road toward Bear Creek, Ruby reflected on the truth of her words. She had indeed become someone entirely new during her months at Sweetwater Station. The change went far deeper than learning to cook over a wood stove or treat illnesses with herbs. She had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed and found the courage to fight for what mattered most. "Mama," Noah said, appearing at her elbow with the silent approach he had perfected over the winter months. "Papa wants to show you something special in the barn. He says it's a surprise that he's been working on for weeks." Intrigued, Ruby followed Noah across the yard to the large barn, where Adam kept his horses and stored supplies for the trading post. The building itself had been expanded over the winter, with new stalls for the additional horses Adam had acquired through trading. Inside, she found Adam standing beside a beautiful hand-carved cradle that gleamed with fresh oil and careful craftsmanship. "Oh, Adam," Ruby breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood and intricate details. The cradle was a work of art, every surface showing evidence of hours of patient labor. It's absolutely beautiful. When did you find time to make this? I've been working on it in the evenings after you fall asleep, Adam explained, his face showing the quiet pride of a craftsman presenting his finest work. The wood is cherry, from a tree that grew beside my grandmother's house in the Cherokee Nation. I've been saving it for something special, something worthy of its history. Ruby traced the carved symbols that decorated the cradle's headboard, traditional Cherokee designs that spoke of protection, love, and the blessing of new life. Each symbol had been carved with meticulous attention to detail, creating a narrative of hope and cultural continuity. "These symbols, what do they mean?" she asked, though she recognized some from her language lessons with Adam. "This one is for long life and prosperity," Adam explained, pointing to a spiraling pattern that seemed to dance in the morning light. "This represents the unbreakable bond between parent and child. And this one," he indicated a complex interwoven design. "This means that the child will be loved by many families, both Cherokee and white, and will serve as a bridge between worlds." Tears stung Ruby's eyes as she absorbed the meaning behind Adam's careful work. Their child would indeed be loved by many families, welcomed into a community that had learned to value people for their character rather than their blood. The cradle represented not just a place for a baby to sleep, but a symbol of cultural integration and hope. "There's something else," Noah said, practically vibrating with excitement that could no longer be contained. "Tell her about the other surprise, Papa. The big news from the territorial capital." Adam laughed at his son's enthusiasm, his eyes bright with pleasure at having good news to share. "I received a letter from the territorial governor's office last week. They're formally recognizing Sweetwater Station as an official trading post and way station. They want to establish a mail route that runs through here. And they're offering a contract for regular supply deliveries to the military posts in the region." Ruby's eyes widened as she grasped the implications of this development. "Adam, that's wonderful. It means steady income, regular contact with the outside world, official recognition of our place in the territory's development. It means our family's future is secure," Adam confirmed, his voice rich with satisfaction. "The railroad may eventually change how goods move through the territory, but for now will be an essential link in the chain of communication and commerce. We'll have guaranteed income and the respect that comes with government contracts. And the best part," Noah added, unable to contain his excitement any longer, "is that Papa says we can expand the trading post and maybe even build a real school here for all the children whose families are settling in the area. Miss Charlotte could even come teach here instead of Bear Creek if she wanted." Ruby looked around the barn that had become a symbol of their family's prosperity and security. The future stretched before them, bright with possibilities she could never have imagined when she first stepped off the stagecoach into Adam's uncertain care. They were no longer just surviving on the frontier, they were thriving, building something lasting. That evening, as the three of them sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Ruby reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. The child she carried would be born into a world where love transcended racial boundaries, where families were defined by commitment rather than blood, and where a woman could find strength she never knew she possessed. Mary emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of tea and fresh biscuits, her movements showing the contentment of someone who had found her place in the world. Over the winter, the older woman had become not just a valued employee, but a beloved member of their extended family. "Mr. Adam," Mary said as she set down the tray, "the new seeds you ordered came in today's delivery. Cherokee beans and corn varieties from the nation. We can plant traditional garden alongside the regular crops." "That's perfect, Mary," Adam replied with genuine pleasure. "I want our children to know both ways of growing food, both sets of traditions. They should understand where they come from." "Mama," Noah said drowsily, his head resting against Ruby's shoulder as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Tell me again about how you came to be our family. But tell the whole story this time, with all the scary parts and the good parts." It had become one of Noah's favorite bedtime stories, though he knew every word by heart. Ruby smiled and began the familiar tale, but with the wisdom that came from living through the experience and understanding its true meaning. Once upon a time, there was a young woman who thought she was being punished by having to marry a stranger in a faraway place. She was frightened and angry, and certain that her life was over before it had really begun. She thought she was paying for her father's mistakes with her freedom, but she was wrong, Noah murmured, his eyes already heavy with sleep. "She was very wrong," Ruby agreed, her voice soft with memory, because what she thought was the end of her story was actually the beginning of the most important chapter. She discovered that sometimes God disguises the greatest blessings as the things we think we don't want. And sometimes the people who need us most are the ones we never expected to love. And the sick little boy who begged her to stay, Noah prompted sleepily, though he was fighting to keep his eyes open. The sick little boy taught her that love isn't something you fall into by accident, Ruby continued, stroking Noah's hair with gentle fingers. It's something you choose to build day by day, with small acts of kindness and large acts of courage. He showed her that family isn't about blood. It's about who you choose to protect and who chooses to protect you. From his chair beside them, Adam reached over to take Ruby's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in the gesture that had become as natural as breathing. His touch still sent warmth through her body, a reminder of the love they had built together against all odds. "And they all lived happily ever after," Noah concluded with a satisfied sigh. His voice barely audible. "They all lived purposefully ever after," Ruby corrected gently, using the words that had become their family motto. "Because happiness isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you create by loving deeply, fighting fiercely for what matters, and never giving up on the people who belong to your heart." As the night settled around Sweetwater Station, bringing with it the gentle sounds of horses moving in the pasture and the distant call of coyotes singing to the moon, Ruby Thunderbear held her sleeping son and felt her unborn child stir within her womb. She thought of the terrified young woman who had arrived here 6 months ago, promised to an Indian as payment for her father's debts. That woman had been certain she was sacrificing her future for the mistakes of the past. Instead, she had discovered that the greatest love stories often begin with the words, "I don't want to do this," and end with, "I can't imagine my life any other way." The contract that had brought her here as payment for a debt had been fulfilled and forgotten, but the promise she had made with her heart would last forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.